The Adventure Jogger, a podcast about trail and ultra running. Meet fascinating runners from the front, middle, and back of the pack, sharing inspiring and funny stories about life and running. Running should be fun, and so should running podcasts. I'm your host, Steven Kornhaus, and this is The Adventure Jogger. Well, on today's episode of the Adventure Jogger Podcast, I have got a guest whose vision is to create a world of well-fueled endurance athletes that have a positive relationship with food and their body. She is a registered dietitian, has lots of experience in endurance events, has completed Ironman events. So I am very excited and honored to have Alex Larson on the podcast. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's I'm excited. I think nutrition is such a hot topic amongst athletes, specifically in the world of ultra running. It's a very individual topic. You know, obviously each person's body is different, but I think there's some very key things that people can do. And I hope that you can shed some light on those to help fuel properly, recover properly, and just have an overall good event, whatever sport that may be.
Yeah, I feel like it's starting to become an eating contest within a race these days.
Yes, absolutely. These aid stations, you know, they've got burritos and soups at ultra running events. They've got quesadillas and burgers and potatoes.
It's a buffet. Oh my gosh, potatoes are one of my favorites. Like those like salted, like soft boiled potatoes where you can like sprinkle salt in them. Absolutely like my go-to.
Yes. Well, before we dive into all things nutrition and fueling, let's hear a little bit about you, Alex. How did you first get into the sport of endurance events?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting like butterfly effect. When I was in college, I formerly was very much passionate about like horseback riding and horse showing. That was like myself as a kid and teenager or young adult. That was my life. It was consumed. All of my thoughts was horseback riding. And then when I got to college, I ran out of money because horses are very expensive. And I had a horseback riding accident where I broke my foot, and I couldn't really do much for actually 3-4 months, because I smashed the crap out of that. Fifth metatarsal. And
I mean, do you mind me asking what happened?
Horse flipped over on me, so she smashed into my left foot, and
oh my goodness,
that outside metatarsal, it was just in so many, they couldn't even count how many pieces it was in. So I ended up with a external fixator, which, if you know what that is, it's where they screw these rods into the bone to straighten it out and hold it in place, and the rods stick out of your skin. So so I was Frankenfoot for about 4 months, which is really great as 20-year-old walking around with that with a flip-flop and wrapped up with an external fixator. So I was told at that point that I might never run again, and that was kind of depressing. And then once those pins came out, I started swimming, and it became kind of a social thing with a few friends, and I got really good at swimming. And then when I graduated college, I was like, I need a goal in mind, something to keep me active, and I'm a pretty decent swimmer, so I signed up for this local sprint triathlon, and I doggy paddled the entire swim. I rode a hybrid bicycle that I bought for a few $100, and then I jogged through the little 5K at the end. But I was hooked at that point. I thought it was such an amazing energy. The supportive just vibes from everyone, I just really thought was wonderful. And then when I started my career as a dietitian, I moved to a little town called Winona, Minnesota. It's in southeastern Minnesota, and they have a local triathlon there every June. And so I was like, I've done a triathlon. And so I signed up for that. And that whole community is very active. And when I was there for 4 years, I just got really into the triathlon sport. And next thing I knew, I was doing Ironman Wisconsin in 2014. It snowballed pretty quickly. And So I was new in my career. Sports nutrition wasn't even really on my radar at all until I crossed the finish line of Ironman Wisconsin. That was where I just had this moment where I kind of felt my calling after seeing all these people struggle out on the race course, especially during the marathon.
Right.
And like thinking about myself, like if I didn't know what I was doing with my nutrition, I don't know if I would have been able to complete the race. And so that was kind of what sparked something in me. And then down the road, I started Alex Larson Nutrition, and I get to work with endurance athletes from all over the world. And I have a team now of dietitians. I have two other gals that work with me who are also endurance athletes themselves. And we, on a weekly basis, say that we have the best job ever. Like we just love our job so much because we get to talk about fueling with gummy bears and recommending Pop-Tarts and like all of these foods that we just like have such nostalgia and love for. And like it truly hurts my soul to tell someone that they can't eat something. So I'm just truly with the right group of people because
Yeah.
it's all about, finding ways to get more fuel in them, better fuel, having them feel their best and being able to do a sport that they love.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves a Pop-Tart. And if you can't eat a Pop-Tart or some gummy bears, then it's a sad world. So
Exactly. Yes. There's
Well,
some
so
definite perks to being an endurance athlete.
yes. So what year was it that you had the horse injury?
I was a sophomore in college, so that would have been like 2007.
Okay, and then you ran the Ironman Wisconsin in 2000, was it 15 or 14?
14, yeah.
14. Okay, so 7 years essentially
Yeah.
to recover from that, but I'm sure it took quite a while.
Yeah.
And build up endurance and other events.
Like that the doctor, who was kind of a jerk, not gonna lie, but he was like, yeah, I don't think you're ever gonna run. And I'm like, don't tell me that. And then next thing you know, 7 years later, I'm doing all sorts of running.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you had this moment, this kind of epiphany when you crossed the finish line that this was your calling to help runners fuel properly, because you said you saw people during the Ironman Wisconsin that were bonking and
cramping and crying and throwing up, and it's a war zone out there in that second half of the marathon.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think I saw on your website, I think it took you a little over 15 hours to complete the Ironman.
Yeah,
is that right?
So it was a long day. And I will admit that year I also got married. I changed jobs and I moved all while training for an Ironman. So I had a few things going on. And
I'd say so.
And so, yeah, at that point I was like, I just want to finish and enjoy the day. But someday I will I hope to do another one and kind of redeem myself.
Yeah.
Really do it right. And right now I'm gonna give gravel racing a try this year. So I've been training a lot over the winter, and this is the first time that I've really been super intentional with my nutrition, and I'm so excited to do some riding this summer because I feel 100 times stronger than what I did back in 2014.
That's awesome. Well, I was getting at was with the 15-hour finish time that parallels a lot to ultra running, because that's kind of for some people that's a 50-mile distance or maybe 100-kilometer distance time.
Yeah.
That time on feet or in the saddle or swimming together, but that time at
it's a long day.
Race. Yeah, it's a long day, and there's definitely some very specific fueling requirements for something of that nature. But it's cool that you mentioned gravel cycling as well and wanting to get into gravel racing, because I think I might jump into my first gravel race this year as well. So that's pretty neat.
Do it. Yes, I keep hearing from people how wonderful of a sport it is. So I'm really excited to give it a go.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you have obviously you started Alex Larson Nutrition. So when did you start that business?
I started 2018. It was kind of just a side hustle for me to do something fun. And then after the pandemic was kind of starting to die down, early 2021 is when I was like, you know what? The job I have right now is kind of sucking my soul. I think I want to make this business a full-time gig. And so within 8 months, I built it up to something that I could do full time. And then that following year is when I started adding Hannah and Mary to my team. Wow. And it's just been truly just a dream come true. It's so fun. And I have 3 kids as well. So having to navigate raising them while also running a business has been quite the challenge.
Yeah, I know that full well. We've got 4 kids as well, so I know that that hustle is difficult.
Yeah, it is.
Well, so you added 2 other women to your team.
Hmm.
So obviously you must have grown this business pretty quickly. I mean, you said over 8 months you went full time and then started adding people the next year. I mean, you must have really put in a lot of very targeted, specific work to get this business going that quickly.
Yeah, I was working my other full-time job during the day, and then as soon as the babies went to bed, I would work from like 8 to midnight most nights for about 8 months straight. It
Wow.
was really exhausting, and then I kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, it's sink or swim time. Like, and so yeah, I quit that job and it
Yeah.
didn't look back. I mean, it's certainly super scary. I remember calling a friend of mine who's also a dietitian business owner, and I was freaking out to her, and she's talked me off the ledge, and I just kind of chugged along. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
Like, truly, it's such a rewarding job because I know firsthand how it can feel to go for a run and have it really feel awful, or go for a run and feel like $1,000,000 when you finish. And
Yeah.
helping people experience the latter is great. Or if they go on a group ride and they can usually barely keep up with the fast riders, and then all of a sudden they're like, I was making them work. Like they were having a
Yeah.
hard time keeping up with me. And I'm like, oh, that's just the best feeling ever. Like it's just very rewarding.
Absolutely. So when you were working these, 2 jobs essentially at night,
Mhm.
you were doing the nutrition job. How were you going about like marketing yourself and finding clients to build this roster?
Um, during that time, my Instagram was pretty popular. It was growing pretty quickly. I like to find humor in endurance sports, and so people kind of resonated with that. So that was probably where I started out. But now, I think people are finding me in multiple different areas. I have my own podcast now, that I just released the beginning of this year. So I've got a few different areas now where people find me. But initially, it was probably mostly through social media.
Okay. And for the listeners out there, tell them the name of your podcast.
It's called Endurance Eats. So it's all about
Endurance
like
Eats.
practical, applicable nutrition advice specifically for endurance athletes.
Okay. And is that released like 1 episode a week, a month? What's your schedule?
We're in season 1 right now. It's just wrapping up. Because again, got 3 kids. I didn't want to like have the commitment of every single week all year round. So we've got usually about 15 episodes per season. And then we'll start back up with season 2 in July of this year.
Okay. Now, these 2 other women that you brought on,
Mhm.
other dietitians as well, do either of them have ultra running experience by chance?
Um, Hannah comes from a triathlon background, and then her husband kind of dabbles in all of the sports, it seems like. And then Mary comes from more of a marathon background, but she also has worked with a ton of ultra athletes and cyclists.
Awesome.
So we've kind of we're pretty exclusively endurance athletes. So ultra
Okay.
runners, marathon runners, some shorter distance runners. We have a few like collegiate runner, female athletes, and then cyclists of all different distances, crit race all the way up to, Leadville 100. And then our triathletes as well, anywhere from beginners all the way up to Ironman.
Okay.
And then we actually a few cross country skiers lately as
Oh,
well.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess let's dive into some nutrition aspects here. And I guess first question I want to ask is, from your experience, you've been doing this now for 7 years, 6, 7 years, professionally.
Hmm.
What would you say is the biggest, most common mistake that you see endurance athletes make regarding nutrition?
Yeah. I think underfueling probably takes the cake. Just either underfueling their workouts themselves. They might fuel their races pretty well, but they might underfuel their training. It might be kind of an intentional thing of like, oh, I don't need this much, can save a few calories. I'm looking to like drop a few pounds. Or it could just be they just don't know how much they should be fueling with. And then when I say, okay, this is where we need you to be with your nutrition, and they're like, that's a lot. I'm like, yeah, it's going to take us a while to get there. So they might not be under fueling their training itself. They might be just not fueling enough before their training to really set them up for feeling great during that workout. Or they might just be not eating a lot during the day. I see a lot of people who skimp on breakfast, maybe have a lunch, they're working throughout the day. They're trying to fit in all of the things with their kids, their training, their job. And so like time is really short. So sometimes eating just gets pushed to the wayside. And then they might eat the majority of their nutrition in the evening when they're kind of at home and have the time to do that. And I see some downsides to doing it that way because they just don't have consistent energy throughout the day. It doesn't support a leaner body composition when you're eating the majority of your nutrition in the evenings. And then it just kind of sets you up for poor performance in your training and you don't see the fitness gains that you were wanting to see.
Right. Now, I know the old adage that every kid heard growing up from their parents was breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Eat a good breakfast.
It's magical. I will totally tell my kids that, but they love breakfast foods as well. Like breakfast is my favorite meal. So I'm always trying to get people to eat more breakfast.
Yeah. I mean, because it really sets you up for your day and for fueling for the activity you're going to be doing the day, whether it's going to your job and doing your profession or you're going to be lifting or training. Without that fuel in your body, it's like a car running on an empty gas tank. It
solves so many problems for people when we can get them to have more of a breakfast, especially because a lot of runners run in the morning. So that is your first meal. That's really going to set you up to recover from that morning workout. And if there's not a lot there, your body's going to be slow to recover and slow to bounce back from that workout. And then you might be still feeling some fatigue the next day when you're going to run again. Because as ultra runners, you guys run a lot. You do a lot of miles, you do a lot of back-to-back long runs. And so you have to take that recovery nutrition seriously. And recovery nutrition for an ultra runner is every single meal and snack the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, talking about the breakfast and the morning runners. So what is your opinion then on, let's say you're going to go for a run at 5 a.m. Do you think, is it better for a runner to wake up maybe an hour early and have a breakfast before the run, or to go do that run and then have a breakfast after the run?
I think it's kind of unrealistic to ask them to get up at 4 a.m. to have a breakfast because sleep is also important to recovery and things. So I try and be very practical with this. I'm like, okay, if you're going to get up at 5 a.m. or get up for a 5 a.m. run, you're maybe getting up at 4:30, 4:45. What can we get in you to at least get a start of some quick and easy carbs to start fueling that workout? And it's going to depend on how long they're running too, but then you're going to have to take in some fuel during to account for the fact that you didn't really get in a lot of great pre-workout carbs in.
Right.
Then post-workout, it's all about replenishing glycogen stores with a good carb-rich breakfast and then getting enough protein to start that recovery process in terms of rebuilding muscle, repairing muscle. And then also it's very helpful for you to just get enough protein throughout the day if you get a good dose at breakfast. If you're getting a skimpy protein breakfast, it's hard to catch up later on in the day. And I find a lot of athletes just don't quite get enough protein. So breakfast is usually where I start in making sure they're getting I'd say 30 to 40 grams. That's a lot of protein, but it's a really good dose to set you up for recovery. And it helps regulate appetite throughout the day too. Because as endurance athletes, we get hungry quite frequently. So if we can have a hefty breakfast, we find that it kind of curbs some of those cravings later on in the day.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned getting in like a high carb breakfast or some form of quick carbohydrates you can get in before that run, possibly if you're waking up 20 minutes before your run.
Yeah.
What's a good option for somebody going out for, an hour run at 5 a.m? They don't want to wake up an hour ahead. Is a banana or a toast with, some nut butter on it kind of thing, oatmeal. What's a good option for those people?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the athlete and how finicky their stomach is. Some people have more sensitive stomachs. I mean, talking to most ultra athletes, you guys have just absolute iron stomachs. If you can go run for 20 hours and taking burritos and pizza while you're running. Like you guys can take in just about anything. And honestly, it's a good opportunity to kind of train your gut with some real food if you can take it in before you start your runs. So like I already mentioned Pop-Tarts. Like Pop-Tarts is one of our favorites because it does have just a little bit of protein and fat in there to kind of stabilize that blood sugar. Because like for me personally, if I have just straight up like carbs right away in the morning, my blood sugar takes a little bit too much of a rush up and I feel a little ill. So I usually like to have a little bit of protein or something with my pre-workout snack, but some people don't notice that at all and can just have some straight up carbs.
Okay.
Graham crackers, applesauce are also some of my, like those applesauce pouches that people get for their kids. Those are one of my favorites because they're so easy. I can grab them and take them super quick if I'm heading off to go meet a friend for an early morning run. Like rice cakes. Like I just got some like caramel flavor like rice cakes the other day, and I put like some sliced banana on it and honey, and I even sprinkled a little bit of like sea salt on there. Something different and really quick and easy. And like just tasty, you know what I mean? Something a little different. And then I just on Instagram recently shared a pancake bowl. Like pancakes are my absolute favorite pre-workout snack, and because you can like load on syrup, and I like just feel like a kid again where I can just like put as much syrup as I want on it. And this pancake bowl, it's literally less than 3 minutes. You can microwave it. It doesn't look real great, but you just put a whole bunch of syrup on it and maybe some fruit and eat that up, and get a really nice dose of some easy carbs.
I bet. Yeah, that sounds good. My kids would love that. My daughter, every morning when she has like it's a waffle or pancake, she's always, I want a drizzle and a dip of syrup. She got to have both.
Yeah. You can find like Krusty's pancake, like complete pancake mix anywhere here in the States. So if you're traveling and in a hotel and you have a microwave, it's something you can make really easily.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, a lot of people, they travel to, an ultramarathon, an Ironman race, whatever it may be. They're in a hotel. They always have a microwave. You can whip up a protein or a breakfast pancake bowl.
Yeah. It's super simple.
Okay. Well, you briefly touched on some of the effects of underfueling for an endurance athlete. What are some of the bigger effects of underfueling for an endurance athlete? Because we know that nutrition is very much tied to certain types of injury as well. I mean, do we see a increased risk of injury from underfueling?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just think about the strain on your body and your muscles when they're not getting the adequate fuel that they need, when they're not getting the nutrition that they need to actually properly recover, and you're just back to back running and putting all of this stress and strain on your body, it really can increase your risk for injuries. And then when your body is low on nutrition, like you're at risk for stress fractures as well. We see that from a lot of runners where they're getting recurring stress fractures. And then we start looking at their nutrition. And we're like, you are not eating near enough what you need to be for the volume of training that you're doing. So those are a couple red flags that we'll see. I think also just like poor energy levels throughout the day, like where people feel like an absolute zombie the rest of the day. They're relying on caffeine to get through their workday, or they're needing to take a nap instead of going out and playing with their kids, and their just energy levels are really poor. That is a big red flag in my mind. And it's one of my favorite wins for our athletes when they can say, I just went for my long run. I ran 16 miles and I played with my kids, I cleaned my bathroom, I got some work done, and I still have energy, and it's 4:00 in the afternoon. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like to them, that's like a way better win than any other PR would be.
Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely. And there's, I'm a certified ultra running coach, and I know a lot of the science I read through the course getting certified specifically touched on, like you said, specific deficiencies around nutrition that were often cited in stress fractures, like athletes that have repeated stress fractures. When they look back, more often than not, it comes back to improper nutrition and fueling of a specific deficiency.
Yeah.
And so getting that proper fuel in is so important, just so critical.
Yeah. And the thing about sports injuries too, that are nutrition related, is they take a little while. They like fester. And so it's like, even if you went, let's say like 6 months of underfueling, and then you finally start fueling better, and then you might like a month later get a muscle tear or a stress fracture, and you're like, oh, well, I've been eating better. It's like, yeah, that 6 months really did a lot of damage, and it takes a while to catch back up. And so
Yes.
it's not something that I want people to wait on. I'm like, if you're suspecting you're under fueling, let's get it taken care of now so that you can have longevity in your sport.
Right. Well, then let's go from under fueling to let's talk a little bit about post race recovery.
Yeah.
What are some great post race recovery things that you would give your clients? Because I know in the ultramarathon world, as soon as you finish a race at a lot of these races, there's people handing out beer, and you're drinking a beer right after.
Yeah.
Which we know is not great for muscle repair.
It's not really going to offer any benefits whatsoever, other than pure
some quick carbs.
Enjoyment. Yeah.
Right. Well, what are some tried and true things that you recommend for your athletes, your clients, for post-race recovery?
Yeah. Number one, it would be starting the rehydration process, starting to replenish some electrolyte losses. With ultra running, the name of the game is to prevent yourself from getting too dehydrated. We know that you're going to get dehydrated. We just don't want you getting so dehydrated that it takes you out of the race and it causes some health concerns.
Right.
So that would be top of my list, would be having some sort of carb-rich, electrolyte-rich beverage to get yourself rehydrating, and beer is not that option. So we need to hold off on the beer, and we need to get you rehydrated, because alcohol is going to dehydrate you even further. So if you want to feel decent in the days after the race, I would hold off on the celebratory beer until you have rehydrated for at least 1 to 2 hours. If not more, depending on how hot and long the race was for you.
Right.
There's that factor too. If you're doing, a race that's cool and comfortable, you're not going to be as dehydrated if you're doing something that's in the desert and you're going to be severely, dehydrated. So,
right.
Those are some factors that you just have to consider with that. And then if you can, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, a quick question on that. You mentioned a carbohydrate-rich drink post, to start that rehydration process.
Yeah.
Is there a specific ratio of carbs to protein that you recommend? I know a lot of brands have a 4-to-1 is what they market.
Yeah.
Is that ideal?
I think for an ultra runner, 4-to-1 would be recommended. 3-to-1 to 4-to-1, somewhere in there. But for an ultra distance, for runners, I would do 4-to-1, because you really need those carbs to reload glycogen stores. But some of those recovery drink mixes, I still feel don't have enough protein in them. They might have 10, 15, maybe 20 grams of protein, but I'm you need probably at least another 15 grams in here. I feel post workout, post race, to really help with, because your body's going to need more than 15 grams to recover initially. And then usually within 2 hours, if you can get a meal in, is what I recommend. If you don't get that meal in, people start to feel kind of sick. And so even if you don't feel like eating, I think it's worth having something, some sort of meal to just get your body re-energized, starting to recover and starting to feel better. There's certainly situations where it's a little bit more challenging depending on where you're at. You might be in the middle of the woods. So having some sort of pack with lots of different options that you can grab post-race to eat, to at least get some sort of semi-meal in is helpful too.
Okay. So after the post-hydration, and you mentioned getting a meal in as well, what are some other key nutritional aspects to post-race recovery?
Yeah, I think eating on a regular basis, depending on when you're getting done with the race, sometimes you're eating and then going straight to bed. Other times you've got the whole day, because you might be finishing, the next morning. And so making sure that you're just eating throughout the day, and staying hydrated throughout the day, and really kickstarting that recovery process will help you bounce back faster.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about eating protein after, and how you recommend they need a lot of protein after ultramarathon type events. What about running? So there's a lot of different mindsets in the ultra world for fueling. You know, you've got your 50-kilometer fueling, which is typically going to be a lot of gels and quick carbohydrates, things like that.
Yep.
100-mile distance, unless you're running a time like Jim Walmsley of like 14 hours, most of us are going to be out there for 25, 30 hours.
Yep.
So you need a lot more. You know, ultra runners have found typically a lot more real food, not just those quick gels.
Yeah, there becomes a point where any calorie is a good calorie.
Yes. Well, what about, I've talked to a lot of people and I've interviewed several that have set fastest known times, FKTs, on very long trails where it's at a minimum, let's say 3 days, at the longest, let's say 40 days to do this event. And they found taking in a crazy amount of protein on those long events was very, very beneficial to their preventing injury, essentially.
Yeah.
Like I know when I talked to Tara Dower, who just set the fastest known time on the Appalachian Trail, like overall, men and women, fastest known time, she was taking 6 to 8 protein drinks daily.
Wow.
So getting lots of protein. What is the science behind that? Is that literally just helping your muscles repair and prevent that injury while you're doing these long events?
Yeah. So as you're exercising, there is some gradual muscle breakdown. And so basically what she's doing is she's kind of replenishing what's getting broken down and supporting that muscle. Because she's out there for multiple days, it would make sense that she needs to nourish her body throughout that process. And so, yeah, she's basically preventing that muscle breakdown. It's not going to help performance-wise based off of what we found in the research, but it's more of like creating that like longevity and like your just overall like physical health for an event like that. But yeah, the carbs are going to want to keep her going, but the protein is there to just help support that muscle, you know, repair.
The longevity.
She didn't sleep that much, if I remember correctly.
No.
Like very low.
No, I think she was getting like 4 to 5 hours a night. Like not a lot for recovery.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that 4 to 5 hours is very crucial to make sure she's got what she needs to help recover during that time, but she's also going to be recovering on the fly as well.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I want to ask, I've got a couple of questions I've been writing down as we've been going, and a couple of them are kind of controversial nutrition topics that I'd love to get your opinion on, but we'll start easy. Plant-based athletes. I'm a plant-based athlete, kind of more pescatarian. I will eat fish every so often. Used to be vegan. But plant-based athletes. I know there's a lot of folks out there that are of the opinion that plant-based athletes just can't get enough protein because it's not whey protein, but there's so many other types of protein out there now.
Yeah.
What are some considerations that plant-based athletes need to take in to make sure they are properly fueling for those for the training runs and also for their races?
Yes. I would agree that it's more challenging for plant-based athletes to get enough protein. It takes more thought and planning. It's not that it's impossible.
Absolutely.
It's very doable, but it just requires more intention to make sure you're getting enough. And you have to be a little bit more creative as well. Because some of like the like plant-based burgers and some of those foods that like are trying to imitate meat, but they're not meat. While they're great, it's not something that I would rely on. I think we also need to make sure we're including some tofu, tempeh, seitan, edamame. If you are like a lacto-ovo vegetarian and you do some dairy and eggs, we can supplement that way. Or if you're strictly, vegan, then we have to really consider like getting that variety of sources throughout the day.
Pea proteins and
pea proteins, nuts, seeds, like all of those things add up throughout the day to get enough. Or even doing things like chickpea pasta, those will have a little bit higher protein. So just those things can add up over the day so you can get enough. The other area too that we usually, with any of our ultra runners that are plant-based, we will ask them to go get their ferritin check. That's their iron stores. With runners especially because of just that pounding of their feet that they can see some red blood cell breakdown. And it's really common for them to have a lower ferritin. And so in that case, we want to talk about doing some sort of iron supplementation to get enough iron in to really support their needs. Because we find that with a low ferritin, it really can negatively impact performance, can really cause them to feel very tired. And so we've had a number of ultra runners that we've turned their ferritin around and their performance and energy levels. Like they're just a different person.
Wow.
Yeah. And like, while we're also improving nutrition elsewhere, like that's just one area where we have to get a little bit more thoughtful about making sure we can get that ferritin up. Even though the recommended range is very wide, even some of those lower within range numbers, like for women, I think it's like 11 to 300 something is the right reference for ferritin. Whereas we like to see with our athletes at least 30, but if it can be above 50 with a ferritin, that's a good range to be in.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Those are a couple key places with our plant-based ultra runners that we've seen improve is iron, making sure they're getting enough iron in their diet, because a lot of that plant-based iron, it's rich in iron, but it just doesn't get absorbed as well as it does from animal-based sources. So we just need to be a little bit more thoughtful and maybe add an iron supplement in there as well.
Right. So basically what I hear overall is, and I can attest to this in my own life, is it does take a lot more intention to get what you need, because it is more difficult to get those sources and the amounts that you need. So you really have to be very intentional with it.
Yeah, I do find that with plant-based athletes, there is a huge advantage to just working with a dietitian to making sure that they learn how to properly fuel themselves. I don't think we've seen a single plant-based athlete where we can say like, oh, you're doing a really good job. Like there's some major gaps that they just aren't aware of. And so we can kind of help fill in those gaps for them and set them up for success.
Well, let me follow up and ask you this then. So when we first went plant-based, which has now been about 5 years, I had already been an ultra runner, and I ran my first ultra marathon as a plant-based athlete, and I won that event, and I was able to recover so much faster than I had ever recovered before we went to plant-based. My body was just, I don't know what it was. It may be the lack of, I know dairy can cause a lot of inflammation in the body, and so the lack of that potentially, but maybe touch on some of the scientific reasons for, or maybe it was just placebo effect and I'm totally wrong, but is there science out there to support a plant-based diet can improve recovery from endurance events?
My understanding of what the research shows is that plant-based eating isn't any better than eating an omnivore. You know what I mean? Like they both have their pros and cons to it. I think
definitely.
I think the reason, and this is me just like in what I observe, is that when you go plant-based, you are a little bit more intentional about what you're eating. You do tend to eat a lot more nutrient dense foods. So you're getting a lot more micronutrients in your diet. And so, and those micronutrients can play a big impact over time in just supporting your health, supporting, your muscles and in all of those tissues that are very important for performance. So to me, I think it has to do more with just like nutrient quality in through your food. But I think it's, in my mind, and as someone that eats meat, like there's still ways to do it well and still eat meat. I think there just needs to be a little bit more balance, because I think sometimes people just rely more on those protein rich foods and they don't get enough, whole grains and fruits and vegetables and beans and legumes and all of that diversity that you would get when you have to eat those for a plant-based diet. So that to me is my thought on it. Like, I don't think one is superior to the other.
Right.
I think to me, I just respect whatever someone's preference is. Like when I talk with an athlete, I'm like, do you have any like dietary restrictions? Do you eat a special diet? And they say plant-based. I'm like, okay, great. We will help you navigate that.
Right.
But we're not going to say like, you have to eat plant-based or you have to eat vegan. Like I leave it up to the athlete and what they decide, and just help support them in however they choose to eat.
Yeah, that's, I'm 100% the same way as you. I believe every person has to find what works for them, whether that is a high carb diet or it's a protein diet, or it's the what do they call it, the omnivore diet, or it's plant-based. There's so many different diets out there that there's you could pick anything. And
the only time that I tell an athlete they're not a good fit for us is if they're more like carnivore, or I will say like we don't work with keto athletes. Right. That might be one of your questions that you have to ask about, like the low carb trend. Like those types of athletes, I'm like, yeah, or if they want to do like intermittent fasting, I'm like, yeah, we're not going to support that because that's just not how we roll. We're team carbs over here. Yep. And so, and I don't know if I can think of any dietitians that work in the sports nutrition realm that even like support the keto. I mean, there might be some. I can think of maybe one that might, but it's just not super common because the research just isn't there to support that. So, right. Yeah, if you're listening and you eat keto, like I'm probably not the dietitian for you.
Yeah, well, one of my questions was intermittent fasting and also keto. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. And I fully agree. The science out there just doesn't, in my view, my opinion, and I'm definitely not a registered dietitian, support a keto diet. But I was really curious more about intermittent fasting. So I do know some athletes that do this and they swear by it. They believe that it is the best thing. Scientifically, the research I've seen doesn't seem to support that for an endurance athlete.
No, absolutely not. Like I jokingly call it randomized starving.
Yes.
Because here's my number one issue with it. I haven't seen it a lot, but I've seen it a couple times, and it's really concerning. Is it's become a socially acceptable way to have some very severe disordered eating.
Yes.
And where people are using it to mask basically almost borderline, if not an eating disorder. And that is really concerning for me. I think the reason why most people choose intermittent fasting is because they are trying to lose weight and improve their body composition for running. And in my experience with my team, we have had great success with our runners seeing improvements in body comp without having to starve them, without having to restrict, with still fueling their workouts very, very well and them seeing performance gains while they also see some weight loss. Yes. And you don't need to fast for long periods of time. And I find with the fasting, you are putting yourself at risk for really poor performance in your running, for poor energy levels, for poor recovery. You're putting yourself at risk for injury, and then you're having to really strain your gut by eating large quantities of food during your eating period.
Right.
And so I just find that the body and the gut is so much happier if we can get you on a more consistent eating schedule throughout the day when you're more active, and instead of you trying to starve yourself during certain times. I think
absolutely.
I think the 8 hours that you should be getting in sleep should be enough fasting for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Next topic it's definitely taken the ultra running world by storm in the last 6 months to a year. And there's a couple of, in particular, athletes out there that are pushing this out there. And it's the high carb fueling. And it's where now instead of athletes trying to get around 70 carbohydrates per hour, some people are saying, oh, you need 120 to 140 grams of carbohydrates per hour.
Isn't that wild? It's just wild.
Nuts. Like, how do people's bodies? I mean, I think the reason that some of these athletes are successful doing this is because they have a certain constitution that can take this type of carbohydrate intake. If people like me or regular athletes out there try this, I think that they're going to experience a lot of probably digestive issues.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of high carb fueling? Is there any science to it, or is it just kind of a fad?
All right. Well, so the typical recommendation for long distance endurance exercise is 60 to 90 grams of carb per hour. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we have those recommendations, those guidelines, is because in the research, when they were had these athletes consuming different volumes of carbs per hour, when they got above the 90 gram of carb per hour range, that is when they saw GI issues significantly increase. Mm-hmm. And so that 60 to 90 gram carb recommendation was based off of, okay, when they're in this range, we see the least amount of GI struggles. And now we're starting to see athletes develop that that gut tolerance to take beyond the 90 grams and do really well. I will say, especially in the cycling world, we are seeing cyclists, the Tour de France guys are easily doing 120 grams of carb an hour. We have one client that has ridden with Jonas Vingegaard a couple times who shared that he has some guys on his team during certain parts of the tour that are doing 200 grams of carb an hour.
Oh my goodness.
But if you think about their watts on the bike are massive. You know, like Vingegaard was, not Vingegaard, Pogačar, the other one that has won the tour.
Right.
He has said that his zone 2 is like 320 watts on the bike, which is wild. I don't even think I can get that in like a zone 100. Like that would be like, that'd be insane to have that be your zone 2. Like he's just such a high level athlete to be putting those levels of watts out on the bike over time for hours and hours, day after day. You have to be putting in the fuel to support that amount of power.
Yes.
And I think for these really high level ultra athletes who are able to sustain their efforts at what they're doing, like David Roche would be a perfect example. Yes. He has trained his gut to tolerate that volume for that long. He's able to sustain a very fast pace long term. So he is aligning his intake with his efforts, right?
Yeah.
For athletes that are not able to put out that effort for that long of time, you don't need that much. And you would have to really build up that gut tolerance. So I do have some athletes who we have them fueling with 120 grams of carb an hour, like some triathletes on the bike of their Ironman, with some cyclists who are really high level cyclists, not necessarily pro, but just like high level amateur cyclists. And they feel great when they are racing at that level. They've got the gut tolerance, and the bike is a different ball game than running. Like running, you have the jostling motion, and that can really make your gut more sensitive to taking in large quantities of fuel. With runners, I find that it's hard to get to 90 grams of carb an hour consistently throughout a race, just because the gut eventually just kind of starts to go downhill. At that point. It just gets overwhelmed. Then there's lots of things going on physiologically, like there's a lot of stress. And so sometimes I'll have athletes fuel at higher rates earlier on in the race when their gut's tolerating it, to kind of give them a buffer so that they can cut back a little bit later on in the race and still get through okay. Where we'll kind of taper it just a little bit so that they're not trying to push things. So sometimes athletes will start out slow and then try and increase as they go along. And I'm like, no, let's flip-flop it. Like, let's spare that muscle glycogen earlier on in the race so you still have it later on. Yeah. Is a tactic that I've often done with athletes as well. And then also I think prep-wise in advance, carb loading, like a proper carb load, like 2-3 day carb load where you're consuming like 80% of your calories are coming from carbohydrates. Okay. Really loads up those glycogen stores. And so I don't care how much carbs you're taking in an hour during your race. If you're not properly carb loading, it's not going to save your soul mid-race. So I do find that you have to do the prep work, really load up those glycogen stores, spare that glycogen as much as possible throughout the race with a good schedule of carbs per hour. And then if you have to dial it back just for gut tolerance reasons, you have some stuff left in the tank to keep you going.
I know a lot of ultra athletes, and myself included, I can tolerate gels as a fuel source for probably gels and, let's say, liquid hydration from a high carb drink. From probably 6 to 7 hours. And then after that, my stomach starts to not want the gels and it wants more real food. I just don't have gut tolerance to take it. Yeah.
I like a mixture of both real food and gels right from the get-go to kind of keep that flavor fatigue at bay. But yeah, sometimes you just get to a point where like I can't consume any. So you have to kind of have a variety of options that you'll tolerate really well. That's kind of the name of the game with ultra running is don't just have tolerance for gels, have tolerance for chews or waffles or some salty, savory things like the potatoes or Pop-Tarts or whatever it is. So you can swap out whatever it is, and you're gonna do well. And that's why practicing it in your training is so important.
Yes. I know. I remember I was running the No Business 100 in 2023. It was my fifth 100-mile race at the time. And I remember around mile 88, it was in the night. I'd been going for, I think at this point, 23 hours, maybe 24 hours. I think it was 23 hours. And I remember that at this aid station, they had a soup that was a plant-based soup with like these plant-based sausages in it. And that was like the most amazing thing I could ever have in my life. At that point, that's what my body wanted. It was so good.
Yeah. There's something about the baked Lay's chips that I ate, or not, they were just regular Lay's potato chips that I ate during the Ironman marathon, where I was like, these are the greatest chips I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
And it was just like to get that classic yellow bag of potato chips. But there's just something about it in that time where you're like, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. Yes. And those are my favorite moments because they really stick with you. Like they're like a core memory from the race.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, what about another big, I guess I'll say fad right now, or thing that is kind of taking the ultra world is bicarb fueling before the event.
Yes.
What do you think of bicarb fueling, like a bicarbonate system?
We have had some athletes that we've recommended it and have done it. The consuming it is not the most enjoyable thing in the world. Have you had it before?
I have not, but I've heard stories. It's just gross. Yeah.
It's like a mucus. It's like specifically the Morton bicarb,
right?
Where you get the bowl and the capsules and the mucus thing that you have to consume. And it's not the most palatable thing to consume. I'm really fascinated what the research is going to continue to bring out with the bicarb stuff, because there's some promising science behind it.
Right.
I don't think it's mandatory for everyone to do it, but if it's something that you want to try, it's expensive. It's like $60 or something per 4 servings, so it's not cheap. But yeah, like if it's something that you want to give a go, you certainly can. If you struggle with like that lactate buildup, you also could look at trying to do like a beta alanine. That's another thing too. We're starting to see some research come out. The only thing about beta alanine is it can give you this like skin crawling feeling in your muscles. It's kind of a weird little side effect. So there's some things you could do to kind of like ward that off, but that's something that like Mary on my team, she's tried beta alanine. She goes, I couldn't get past the crawliness that it gives my skin. So yeah, and I will say, with you being plant-based, and this is episode 2 of my podcast, is I had an expert on creatine come in, one of the researchers, and I would say for plant-based athletes, like a creatine is a really good idea.
Yes.
For just, you tend to have lower creatine levels because you're not eating meat, and can really help with just recovery and maintaining muscle mass. And I've been taking it probably the past 8 months. I've been really happy with it. When I first started taking it, I had these visions in my mind as I was drinking it that I was going to wake up the next morning and be like swole. I think of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but like it hasn't happened yet. It's been months. So it's not going to cause you to bulk up, but I think for recovery purposes and maintaining nice lean muscle for athletes, it is definitely one of the most well-researched.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so I am kind of a fan of using creatine.
Yeah. And I've been using creatine for years. And the reason I started taking it is because I had a problem with rolling my ankles and stretching and tearing tendons. So, and I found scientific research that supported that creatine actually, for lack of better words, it kind of lubricates your tendons and ligaments to where they stretch a little more instead of maybe tearing. And so I was taking it for that reason to see if it would help. And then now I'm in the gym lifting as well. It is helping that as well. So I continue to take it. And I think it's one of the best supplements that an endurance athlete can take. I think it's great.
I think the major deterrence is the fear of like that little bit of water retention. It's the weight gain from that, but it's pretty minimal. You just take like that 5 grams a day, and it's I think it's a winner for endurance athletes. That
Yeah.
little bit of water retention that you might experience is well worth it.
Yeah. Well, back on the bicarb thing and maybe even the high carb fueling, do you think this is something that, aside from cost, I mean, do you think that these are things that mainly are for or would benefit more elite level athletes, very like they're at the tip looking for that extra boost of performance, or is this something that's going to benefit someone running the middle to the back of the pack of a race?
I have this saying where I'm like, I don't care what level of athlete you are, you deserve to fuel yourself really well. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I'll have athletes that will come into our program and they're like, I feel kind of embarrassed like applying to your program. And I'm like, why? They're like, well, I'm not like a high level athlete. I'm like, you deserve to feel your best. You deserve to go into your race and be happy with your performance and to feel really good and to have all of your training like show for something.
Yes.
And I don't care what level of athlete you're at. I don't care if you're a pro, if you're not. Like I would say 99% of our athletes are just regular amateur athletes. And and so if you want to use bicarb to give yourself a little lift, then use bicarb. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. I think it's just a personal like decision for someone.
Right.
I think it's good to make informed decisions though. Like, is it something that's going to benefit you? It could definitely, but I would trial it a couple times before you use it in a race. You don't want to use anything brand new right away on race day. That's like the cardinal number one golden
Yeah.
rule. And see if you notice a difference. Mary on my team, who's a very high level marathoner, she has used it for her races. She personally thinks she notices, fresher legs later on in the race, and that's her obviously fueling the race very, very well and carb loading
Right.
really well. But she wanted to see if it gave her that edge, and she felt like it does. And we've had marathoners that try to qualify for Boston or try to qualify for some certain race, and we're like, hey, let's give this a go and have this be maybe something that just kind of helps enhance. But we have to have the foundation of good, day-to-day eating to build up like recovery throughout your training so you can go into your race healthy. We need to have good fueling and good hydration strategy for your race itself, because that bicarb is not going to replace any of those other things.
Right. Well, the next question I wanted to ask is, so I'm a coach and I've been recently trying to learn more about the female anatomy, the body, and how to fuel it properly. And I've read a book, or I'm listening to a book right now by Dr. Stacy Sims called Roar.
Yep.
And the catchphrase there is "Women are not small men," and they shouldn't be treated that way.
Yeah.
And I agree. So obviously, women's bodies are different. What are some key fueling differences that women need to take into consideration? Because obviously they have their menstrual cycle they have to worry about. You need to get more type, maybe some branched chain amino acids, some leucine in there to get the protein. There's a lot of things you got to consider. So Wayne, what could some of our listeners benefit from, our female listeners?
Yeah, I think well, I love that Stacey Sims is kind of a pioneer in the female athlete research with it, which I think is great. I will say I don't agree with like 100% of her like nutrition advice, but I do really appreciate the research that she's doing. And we are starting to see more and more research on like female specific recommendations, especially like how to fuel around the menstrual cycle. And then even like for athletes who are like going through menopause, like perimenopause, menopause,
Right.
postmenopause, like how to fuel for that. I think before when we have an athlete that comes in and they want to like really dial in their nutrition around their cycle, I'm like, okay, let's first make sure we have a good foundation. Like let's make sure you're eating enough. Let's make sure we're getting enough protein. Let's make sure we're getting enough micronutrients. Let's cover all the bases before we go to like this like secondary level of like detail with nutrition. So with fueling around your menstrual cycle, in the follicular phase, so that's the first half of your cycle, assuming your cycle is around 28 days, everyone, like it can vary from 25 to 34, something like that. That first half, that follicular phase, we do find that women can efficiently take in carbs really well. So performance wise, if your race lands on like a follicular phase day, I'm
Mhm.
like, let's embrace the carbs because your body is going to thrive performance wise. When
Okay.
you get to more of the luteal phase, we do notice that their metabolism can be a little bit higher. So it might be up 100, 200 calories. And so what often happens is that in that luteal phase is women will either eat the same or they might restrict a little because they're like, oh, I'm going to get my period here soon. I'm going to see that little bit of weight gain. I might restrict. And then they end up super hungry by the time they get on those days right before their period. Because they like underfueled a little bit too much in those days. So a little bit more protein in the luteal phases, especially helpful. And then just maybe like a little extra slight snack or a bigger snack to account for that little bit higher metabolism is something that we can help with. But again, this is like assuming they're not on an IUD and they have a cycle. Sometimes they don't even know what their cycle is because they don't have a period because of their IUD. So that there's some individual things that I think for women they need to kind of account for. But that foundation is honestly going to make like 90% of the difference.
Okay. Well, what about the thought that during the luteal phase, women are actually can put out like the most power during that phase? Do you think that's accurate? Is that true? Or
Um, I mean, initially that's what we're seeing in the research, but we're so new at this that I think we need to keep looking at that. But yeah, I think I guess for me, I don't notice like a huge difference in the cycle. I do notice like there's going to be some water retention like in that at the end of the luteal phase, and I think it's okay to just kind of embrace that and stay hydrated. And then the other thing too would be like making sure you're getting enough iron in your diet too to account for like blood losses there every month.
Yeah.
So, and then I will also say, if you're not getting a period, like if you've got some dysmenorrhea or amenorrhea, that should be the number one most top priority for a female athlete if they've lost their period because of overtraining or underfueling. That's a really big health red flag.
Yeah.
It's why when I kind of screen our athletes before they come into our program, I have specific female questions like, tell me about ovarian health. Like, I need to know, like, do you have a cycle? Because if they don't, I'm like, that's top priority. I don't care about any other goals. Your top priority is your health. We need to get that period back because otherwise you're at risk for injury and illness and other things.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot to consider for females out there.
Yeah.
So last question, or sorry, not second to last question I had. Greens powder, superfood, greens.
Oh, yeah.
It's all the rage, all the rage.
Yeah.
Do you think it's beneficial? Straight to the point, is it beneficial?
I'm kind of neutral on the greens powders. I've number one want to make sure that it's either NSF certified for sport or informed choice for sport. I need it to be third party tested because in the US supplements are not regulated. I want to make sure that it's safe to consume. It's not going to have any harmful ingredients. And then what they say is on the label is actually in the product. So that third party testing is number one. Athletic Greens, is probably the most well-known popular one. That one is NSF certified for sport. It's interesting because Mary on my team, she's taken it before. When we were kind of trialing it ourselves, but I was pregnant at the time, so I haven't tried it myself. This was a couple of years ago. But she tried it and she's like, I actually kind of like it. She goes, I feel good on it. She goes, my nails are stronger. She goes, she goes, I do kind of like it. But then we had someone else try it and they had their labs drawn and their liver enzymes were elevated. The only thing that they changed was adding in AG1. And they went off of it. And a few months later, they got their blood redrawn and their liver enzymes went back to normal. And so that was concerning that it might just be something if you're going to take it that after a little while you have some lab work done just to make sure everything looks good with your labs. Because sometimes too much of something can also be harmful, and there's a lot in those.
Yes.
But I'm not against them. If someone's taking it, I don't tell them to get off of it unless there's maybe some GI concerns or something where we're just like, let's go off of all supplements and just start with a baseline with nutrition, get consistent, and then we could rebuild some supplements as needed. But I'm not against it, but I'm not a promoter of it either, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a perfect. Good answer. Last question then. For athletes training and racing at high altitude, what are some considerations that they need to take in to properly fuel at altitude? Because it's difficult to take
it is really hard.
13,000, 14,000 feet.
Yeah. Okay. So number one, in preparation for going to altitude, and I already talked about this with iron levels, is you want your ferritin to be at a really good number, and for sure above 50. Because when you're heading up to altitude, like if you're going up to Leadville at 10,000, 12,000 elevation, your body is going to have to adjust for that. And your body's going to make additional red blood cells to account for there's less oxygen in the air. And it needs a really good ferritin base, iron store base, to be able to do that. If you're going into it with a low ferritin, low hemoglobin, you are going to really struggle. So months in advance, I usually tell our athletes, hey, go get your ferritin checked with your doctor. Or if your doctor's not going to do it, see if you can get like a local lab, like testing thing to check your ferritin, just so we know if we have to start an iron supplement to get you at a good level going into that race. The other thing is hydration. You are going to get dehydrated a lot faster. So typically what I will tell athletes a couple months in advance is like, you need to start practicing taking in larger quantities of fluids and adapting your gut, building that gut tolerance to tolerate higher volumes of fluid while you're running. That will allow you to stay hydrated and keep you going. Because once we get dehydrated, it impacts gut, like your digestive system. It slows you down. It impacts cognition. Like it's going to take you out is probably one of the more common things, especially even if it's cooler when you're up in that dry air, it just sucks you dry. So practicing that, those higher volumes of fluid, just so you get used to taking in that volume of fluid, you get into the habit of drinking frequently. And then also it kind of, that gut will adapt so you don't notice that sloshy feeling as much when you're running and taking in that higher volume of fluid. And then just being comfortable taking in more carbs, because again, you're going to be burning through glycogen and through carbs a lot faster at elevation. So training that gut to be able to consume enough carbs consistently over the race is vital.
Now, what about, I was trying to find a supplement that I had taken prior to Leadville, and so I was going to ask your opinion on nitrates. What do you think? I know there's some scientific evidence that goes back to a military study that was done with nitrates in high altitude operators or soldiers. But as far as endurance sports and athletes go, do you think there's a benefit to taking a nitrate supplement, before and during?
Like a beetroot thing?
Kind of like a beetroot. There's some out there that are specifically formulated. It's synthetic, unfortunately, but like a beetroot is one that you could take as well.
I mean, there is some promising science on it, like some good research on it. It's not something I typically recommend a lot. I don't know. I'm kind of like on the fence on that one.
Yeah. Because I don't know personally if it helped me or not when I was taking it in training at 12,000 feet. I feel like maybe it did in training, but then when I did the Leadville 100, I still ended up having issues at altitude for 28 hours and ended up vomiting in the last 12 miles. So
yeah. I mean, do you typically get to Leadville right before the race, or do you give yourself some time to?
Well, I live in Colorado, so I live at like 7,000 feet, and I train up to 12,000 feet all year round, or I did for this race.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like going to Leadville from sea level. It was I was used to training at 12,000 feet, but still had use.
Yeah, I have seen my sister-in-law, her family lives in Colorado, and she had told me, because when I had my husband and I did a long weekend in Colorado Springs, and I live more at sea level. So,
Right.
in northern Minnesota, we don't see much elevation. We don't have any mountains here. So, when we went there, and I had looked up, there was actually some research on that, like some vitamin C will actually help prevent that uric acid level from increasing too quickly. So I did have my husband and I take some vitamin C.
Yeah.
We never experienced any elevation sickness, fortunately, just in that. And we flew in to Colorado on a Friday. I did a 10K trail run Saturday.
Nice.
In the Cheyenne Mountain area there.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was so fun. And then we later on that day did the Manitou Incline. So
awesome.
I got some really good exercise at elevation.
Yeah.
That's
why that's where I live. I live in Colorado Springs, and I do the incline
oh my God.
frequently. It's
I
beautiful.
loved it there. I would go back in a heartbeat. Like it's such a fun trip. But yeah, that Manitou Incline was something. Holy
It's tough,
smokes.
especially coming from from Minnesota, low altitude. That's good because it gets up to 8,500 feet at the top of the incline.
Yeah, my husband was not in like shape whatsoever, and he's like, I think you're trying to kill me. And then when we got all done, he was like, okay, I'm glad I did it, but he goes, it really sucked during it, and I ended up just like going on ahead without him, and he had to stop much more frequently than I did, but it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, Alex, this has been an awesome chat. I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have learned a lot also, and just been fun hearing all about all these kind of controversial nutrition topics, because there's
a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty more that we didn't touch on.
I know, and I'm sure people have their opinions and they're listening and they're just like disagreeing with me, but hopefully like, you guys understand, like I'm coming from a place of like, let's make an informed decision, but it's up to you what you want to decide to do.
Yes. Well, tell all of our listeners where they can find you on socials, your website, where people can find you and your business. Yeah.
So my website is alexlarsonnutrition.com, and I've got a blog on there. You can find my podcast on Apple, Spotify, everywhere that's Endurance Eats, and then I'm on social media at Alex Larson Nutrition, mostly Instagram and Facebook.
Okay. And are you in a place where are you currently taking athletes right now? We are. Yeah. Usually January through April is our busy season, but because I have Hannah and Mary on my team, we always have some athletes graduating, which makes room for new athletes. And so we haven't been on a wait list in the 3 years they've been with me. So we're usually always accepting new clients. How it works is there's an application on my website. You would fill out that application. It comes to me, and then I will send a little invite to book a call with me. We talk for about 40 minutes or so. I ask questions. I try and visualize what it would look like for that athlete in our program, talk about it so we're all on the same page, and then kind of talk about length in the program and get them onboarded and started. So I try and vet them pretty heavily just to make sure that it's the right fit for both of us. Okay. Now, what if there's an athlete that's, say, running the Level 100 or running the Western States 100, and they just want help building a nutrition plan for that race? Is that something that you all do as well? Yeah. So we will help both with the day-to-day nutrition and also like fueling the training to set you up for success on race day. So if we know we have a specific A race that we're shooting for, I'll say, okay, here's where we're at right now with nutrition. Here's where we want to be leading up to race day. So we'll kind of work our way and build our way up there. It's not kind of a, rip the Band-Aid off, like go from 0 to 100. We try and be really progressive in our process. I always say the term of like, hey, we have a lot of tools in our tool belt, but we're not going to hand them all over at once. We're going to start with the easiest tools and strategies and then kind of build up to where we need you to be so that we're creating something that's long-term, that's going to create like sustainable, lasting success so that when they graduate from our program, they feel very comfortable and confident maintaining things on their own without having to journal their food for the rest of life, without them like second guessing or questioning. We want them to have that clarity and confidence. Okay. Awesome. Well, like I said, it's been fun chatting, and at some point, I've got several athletes, and one of them has some nutrition issues, so I might be reaching out to you for or referring you as well. Send it over. We're happy to help. Yeah. Well, it's been great, Alex. I appreciate you coming on and telling us all about the world of nutrition and these controversial topics, and wish you the best. Love it. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode of the Adventure Jogger, please consider joining our Patreon and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok for more content like this. Without your continued support, we would not be able to produce this type of content. So thank you so much to everyone that has listened, followed along, subscribed, liked, commented, you name it, donated on Patreon. Thank you.